Once again, welcome to our Animal Justice Academy Lunchtime Live. I'm Kimberly Carroll, the AJA Director, and our theme today is ways to use AI in animal advocacy with Tom Conger from Stray Dog Institute. And welcome to all you lovely beings here with us live. Welcome to those of you who are watching the replay, and welcome to Tom. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for having me. I'm really so glad that I can contribute to your community, and I've benefited from it in the past. I've been live for a few sessions, and I've done a few replays as well. And
Amazing.
yeah, so thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, we are so happy to have you, Tom. And folks, I want to give a little bit of an official background, bio on Tom, so you know who this is, taking us through this little ChatGPT journey today. Tom Conger is the executive director of Stray Dog Institute, which provides nonprofit groups who are working towards dignity, justice, and sustainability in the food system with funding, strategic research, and collaboration opportunities. We love this about Stray Dog Institute. Tom began his career in philanthropy service 10 years ago when he founded a social venture to help donors and nonprofits make the best use of charitable giving and developed a software platform to reduce the cost of donating, raising, and investing funds. The venture's affiliated charity called Blackbaud Giving Fund has granted $266 million to more than 100,000 nonprofits since 2020. And before philanthropy, Tom founded and led a boutique research and consulting firm with offices in Washington, D.C., London, Shanghai, Tel Aviv. The firm specialized in foresight and its application to strategy and innovation, primarily for Fortune 500 companies, including many in food and agriculture. So I just wanted folks to know what a smarty pants we have here working with us today. Tom, let's dive in. Earlier this year, I don't know, it just felt like out of nowhere, all this AI talk just fell out of the air. And suddenly everybody was talking about it. It was in all the news everywhere. Explain what happened. Where did this fall from? And what were your initial thoughts when it came out and in terms of animal advocacy?
Well, I've been following technology for a number of years, decades even. And so AI has always been at some form or fashion in the background for a long time. We just haven't really been able to see how it's affected us. But banks were already using it to make decisions on whether to loan us money or not. Segmenting databases to see what type of cohort we should belong to. But what changed is, well, two things. One is just the scale of the sophistication and the data and the computing power that can be applied to this is just absolutely amazing. And then the second thing is it put this technology in our hands. There's a subset of AI, which is generative AI, which is all about creating new content. It could be text, it could be images, it can be video, it can be audio, songs, any number of things. And I think that's the capacity plus us being able to use it has really brought it to our attention. And then for me, what really made it important was, when I thought about the movement, some people feel like AI is going to advantage those that are well-resourced. And there's certainly some things that they could do. But I actually think for those of us that are under-resourced as nonprofits, it could make a big difference for us. I think for the larger organizations that are already well-resourced, unless they are investing a lot of money into it, they're not going to get the same level of benefit. So that's why I think it's just sort of exploded.
Yeah, because there is, I think we could arguably say there is no movement that is more underfunded and under-resourced than the animal advocacy movement. Growing rapidly, amazingly, but we're climbing a huge mountain. So that is really heartening to hear. And yeah, and I love you being able to make this differentiation about generative AI. AI has been around forever, but what we're talking about is the generative AI that's allowing us as just individuals to be able to create content that on a level that we've never been able to do before. So, what are your current thoughts about how important it is that the movement and individual advocates actually get up to speed with AI? Like, what's the downside to not, getting on this fairly soon?
Um, so, at first I thought our only competition in a way was big ag, really. And we had new tools, new uh, uh, skills that we could develop that could help us. And so there was some sense of urgency around that. But then I also began to realize that a lot of other philanthropic areas, which we probably all support in some form or fashion as allies, they're using this technology as well. And so I obviously from our role as a grant maker think about philanthropy and dollars and resources. And it dawned on me that a lot of other interest areas will also be using these tools to gain public attention, funding, government attention, and interventions and funding. And so there's just a lot of competition, and I feel like we need to be able to use those tools to remain competitive. And at the same time, I think we have to be really smart about how we use the technology, that it doesn't come back to backfire and reflect poorly on the movement. So just a quick example would be,
Yeah.
let's say someone, uh, we can't do undercover investigations anymore, right? Let's just say that ag law passes and we're not allowed to do that. And then someone thinks, and this is not a good idea, but someone thinks that they should use generative AI to create some pictures of some abuse or a video of abuse that didn't really happen.
Mm.
And they use that as a way of garnering attention for the movement, thinking that it's going to serve animals. And what really happens is every other real undercover investigation could be so easily dismissed as fake. And so
It discredits
again,
us completely. Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mm. So Tom, I want to talk a little bit more about the general AI in general, but I know that people really want to sort of get hands-on with this tool that most of the folks here will be using, and that is ChatGPT. Okay, so tell us a little bit of what ChatGPT is.
Sure. So there's artificial intelligence at the highest level. There's different types of AI. Generative AI is one of them. And it's really all about creating new content based on patterns that have been observed after AI has looked through, a lot of data. Um, and then ChatGPT is a subset of generative AI. So it's just one of several ways of accessing AI that's based on chat. And what's really nice about that is it means that I can ask questions and I don't have to program it in a certain way. I'm actually using it on my phone where I talk to it and it talks back to me. So it's very much like a conversation that I'm having. So
With a
what's so
personal
marvelous?
assistant who's very smart.
Yes, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So with ChatGPT, it it's the interface that gives us access to that power, and we don't have to be perfect. We can actually even ask it for help. Like, I didn't get the result that I wanted. How could I have improved the prompt that I asked? And we'll go into that at some point.
Mm.
Um, ChatGPT started off primarily you gave it text and it gave you text back. But now it's multimodal, so I can give it pictures, I can upload files. Uh, it can now give me back pictures depending on sort of when you go into ChatGPT, uh, there's different access points. So you can use one that has plugins. You could have another that has access to an image generator, Dolly. Uh, you have another that's designed for more analytical work where you can upload large databases. So it's really changing quickly, and sometimes they'll introduce new features and then sometimes they'll quickly back out of it when they realize that they may have, released a feature too soon. But
Mm.
that's my overall description of ChatGPT and
Yeah.
how it can be useful.
And Tom, can you give us give folks a little idea of like where Chat GPT has pulled all of the information? Because it's not it's not just like Google, right? It's a little bit different. Like it's been fed particular information.
Yeah, and again, I describe myself as an enthusiastic user.
Yeah, yeah.
AI is not my area of expertise, really even
Mhm.
technology isn't my area of
Yeah,
expertise.
yeah.
So in layman's terms, there are really sort of two phases. And the first phase is basically just sucking in all the information that it possibly can from a variety of sources. And then there's been some controversy about that. It was pulling stuff from behind paywalls. It was looking at artwork that was copyrighted or books that were copyrighted. But there was this vast intake of data. And then on top of that is a smaller set of data that they use and test and use it to answer questions. And then there's humans that are basically providing feedback to the responses that it gets. So you can say, oh, this is good. You're on the right track, more of this. Or if it gives a response that doesn't really meet expectations, oh, this is bad. The other thing that it helps do is it helps with some guardrails of the kinds of content that you can produce. And I was trying to create a few images, for example, that we could demo today. And I was actually surprised. One of the limitations now is not being able to show an animal in distress.
Whoa,
Um,
wow.
so I thought, well, if we could do something for the ag gag law, maybe we'd have a cow that was gagged as just part of
Mhm.
a meme that could be used. And it refused to create that because it was
Wow.
against the parameters that had been set.
Got it. Okay, amazing. Okay, and one more thing before I get you to screen share and for us to get in. Can you tell us the difference between ChatGPT 3.5 versus 4? Because that is going from free to paid, but there's a big difference between the two, right?
Yeah, there is a big difference, and people ask me that all the time. Can I just stick with the free version? Um, I know $20 is more to some
$20
people.
a month. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
$20 a month is more for some people than others, but the difference is significant. Yeah, it's not like you're giving up 5% or 10% improvement for that $20. You're really getting what feels to me is a totally different offering. And if I accidentally uh, jump into 3.5 instead of 4, I can instantly tell because it's just not the same level of precision. It also doesn't have the same feature set. Having said that, you could also go to Bing. It's Microsoft's search engine, and uh, they have access to ChatGPT 4. It doesn't have the same working memory or tokens. It can't handle as much text at once, and there's some other downsides. But that's another way to at least experiment with ChatGPT. But if you get to the point where you really want to give it a try and you're trying to determine if this is going to be worthwhile or not, I think that $20 for a month or two as you're testing it out would be well worth it. And in fact, if you made your decision based on 3.5, you'd probably end up making the wrong decision.
Mhm. Yeah, and so, for people that are doing a lot of content creation or want to do more content creation, research, advocacy, that is more content related, that might be a really great investment. But for those that just want to play around and kind of see what this is all about, 3.5 is perfect. So right, so we're going to be you're going to be demoing 4, but it looks very similar. It's really just the depth that you can go into. So let's bring it up, Tom. So, first of all, can for folks who've never gone on Chat GPT, can you give a little quick rundown? This is what it looks like, and how does one get there?
So you navigate to the website and you're able to sign up, and you can either get the free version or you can upgrade to the $20 a month version. What I'm showing you is the $20 a month version because it gives me access not just to 3.5, but also to uh, GPT-4. And the one reason that I like GPT-4 is there are some subsets within that that allow me to access certain features. So right now I'm on default, but I could also select browse with Bing. It says it's in beta because it's still working out some things, but one of the shortcomings of ChatGPT relative to other AI ChatGPT or chat-oriented uh, offerings like Bard and Claude, those had access to the internet from the very beginning, practically. ChatGPT did not. It only had access to that initial round of training data. So this allows ChatGPT to catch up, and now you could see data in real time. It used to be that you would get, sorry, we don't know anything that happened beyond, September of, I think 2021 was the cutoff year. But now it's you get access to much more recent data. The advanced data analysis allows you to load large data sets and have it use tools to analyze those data sets. There's help with coding, other things that you wanted to do. I had it help me recently create a simple HTML file without a lot of experience, and it worked first time, and embedded some code that I had gotten from a third-party vendor, and it was just
Wow.
absolutely amazing.
So it
The
helped you
next
put
one,
a web page together.
yeah, and just I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but we we were collecting some video testimonials. I wanted to make it available to someone, and was going through all of this work to try to set up a page and secure it. And what I did instead was I asked ChatGPT, what are some alternatives to that? And it said, well, why don't you mail them, among them, why don't you mail an HTML file that has the code embedded? And I'm like, that's a great idea. Can you help me create the HTML page and embed the code? And I gave it the code, and then it gave me the page. I saved it, sent it, and it worked. And I don't
Wow.
know HTML. So it's really impressive.
Amazing.
And um, I'll pick up the pace a little bit, but plugins is really important because it allows you to access other services through GPT. So if you're asking about travel, it may behind the scenes make those reservations through your travel agent, or a site like Expedia, or other sites. So it really gives you a lot of access to um, to other services. And then Dolly 3 is the image generator, which used to be a separate product offering that you have to access, outside of ChatGPT, and now you can have it built in. So that's a very quick overview. I'm sorry if that was a little more information than what you wanted,
No,
but
no, that's all right.
I think it's
So
really important.
I was going
Yeah.
to say, Tom, and just for people to get a Chat GPT account, they actually do have to. You have to enter your email, and you have to choose a password, and that's it. You don't need to put a credit card down again, unless you decide you want to do the point four. Cheryl is asking, can you do this both on your desktop and your phone? And I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yes, you can. And in fact, I actually use it on my phone probably as much as I use it on my desktop, because on my phone, I can talk to it and have it talked back to me. And one of the examples that we have is actually role play, which I was actually impressed when I could do role play and it was all text based. But now I can actually set up a scenario, describe the role that I want ChatGPT to play, what my role is, what the objectives are, what the scene is, and then we have questions. So I can have someone pretending to be a news anchor ask me questions. I can respond, and then it just doesn't go to the next question on the list. It actually considers what I've said and ask a question that builds upon that. So it's just a real back and forth. And I don't do a lot of interviews, and just I'm pretty good at the writing back and forth. But
Yeah.
when I had to interface with the talking back and forth, it was a whole another world. And I'm glad that I didn't
Yeah.
have to do that all the time. But yeah, you can use it on your phone. Since this is kind of a casual group, I will say the one thing to be careful of is that when you go to buy the app, make sure that you're getting it from OpenAI. There's a lot of other apps out there, and they say ChatGPT, but they're not by OpenAI. And there could be additional charges, you know, get the same feature set. So that's just a word of warning that I think will serve you well if you actually go out and get the app.
Amazing. Thank you for that caution, Tom. Okay, so I think everybody's going to be very curious about this tool, this role play tool. But let's start with one of the simplest ways to use ChatGPT, and that is creating content.
Sure, we'd be glad to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just go to one of my conversations on the left, and you can see I have AI and generative models, research, archive, protest. These are all conversations, and what's really nice is ChatGPT keeps all of these conversations separate, and I can go back to it at any time. So if I want to talk, you know, if I'm looking at text output, I can go there and see what I've said already and what the responses were, and then I can go to another one and then bounce back. The other thing that I really like about this is if someone else also has a paid subscription, they can join your conversation. So two people can make contributions to the same conversation, the same folder, which is really helpful. I've found that sometimes I was using ChatGPT as my own thought partner and getting pretty far along in my own thinking, and then I wasn't aligned with my colleagues anymore because I wasn't using them as a sounding board like I used to, and learning from them. And so by inviting them into the conversation, we can all learn from ChatGPT and see where we're thinking and evolve together. So, but coming to text, this is where most people, you know, this is why they come to ChatGPT, is they want help. And so I use this to do a little research on C275, since at the last session, this is, you know, a big topic, and I knew it would be important, you know, to a lot of folks. So I said, please identify and explain the 10 most compelling arguments against Canada's Bill 275. And it gave me a list, and notice that I had asked for 10, but it decided that 4 was enough. And often it's actually right, because it's trying not to give you more than what you really need, and it has a sense that the 5th and 6th are not going to provide the same level of value. So that laid out the sort of the arguments that could be made. And then I asked, what is the writing style of animal justice? And I gave it the link, and it went and checked it out. And this is what it told me. And I share this with you because I think that a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the content that ChatGPT produces, they are not giving it any instructions on the style that they want.
Yeah, let's stop there, Tom, because this is
Sure.
a very important piece, and the thing that I think is so cool about ChatGPT, in the style of. So give us some examples, or just all around about that.
So in the style of tells ChatGPT how you want it to write, what kind of voice. And you could take shortcuts. You could say, you know, write in the style of the New York Times or USA Today.
Or a person, right? It could be a person, like in the style of Russell Brand, or in the style of Oprah Winfrey, you know?
Exactly. And you can also do that in the role play as well, where you can pick someone that you want it to imitate, as long as there's enough information. So when I first started, I was basically analyzing all our blog posts and having it create a sort of a house style, but it so closely mirrored what The Guardian did that became my shorthand. I could say, in the style of The Guardian, write such and such. And if you're ever struggling with how to interface or provide instructions, just ask ChatGPT. I said, I want to describe the house style of Stray Dog Institute in the most concise way possible, but I want to cover everything. What are the categories that I should cover, and how would you describe those attributes, those style attributes, after looking at our blog? So ChatGPT can help you along the way. The other thing that you can do is to specify the target. Is this for young adults age 18 to 25? Is this for baby boomers who are thinking about legacies? Is this in what language? Like one of the examples that we might get to, for example, and I could probably do it at some point, you can ask it to create the blog post in French if you wanted to. You could take something in English and ask it to translate. I will say that in anything that you write or translate, there should always be some form of human intervention and just looking at it, because you never know. One thing that happens is bias, that it may be pulling on that large data set that we talked about earlier, which has a lot of bias and begins to describe things, whether it's in text or pictures, that are based on those, that bias. So, for example, if you asked, for an image of a doctor or to take the voice of a doctor, it might be a white male, for example. So often I will specify either as the target or the image or the text. I'll add things that will provide a more inclusive perspective and viewpoint, particularly in the images. But I say that because you never know when one of those, that a bias is going to slip through, and you certainly don't want to publish something that's going to be offensive or characterizes the movement as not being inclusive. The other thing that happens is sometimes there's hallucinations. So what that means is it just makes stuff up. When it, and there's this tendency to kind of put human attributes on it, where you're saying, oh, it wants to please you, so it's going to make stuff up. And it does feel that way, but in many instances, it's just making predictions about what the next words are going to be based on what you've asked and where it started. And it can just kind of go off, the rails a little bit. And they call it hallucinating. So even if it provides you with a footnote, check out the footnote. And you can see in this text that was generated, there's a 1, 2, 3. Oh, it actually has a blog archive from Animal Justice as the first. So
yeah.
Oh,
so that's the key, right, Tom? Because
yeah.
There's a lot of chat going on. People are like, oh shit, we don't know what is real and how do you know? And that's the big thing is references, is footnotes, is citations, right?
Yeah, it helps. And just because there is a citation doesn't mean that's
It's
enough.
A true one.
Yeah, it's a true one. So go check it out. But this certainly helps to have that and adds to the credibility.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I want to come back and address more around, these ideas of plagiarism, of bias and everything. But let's just go back to this whole idea of searching, and the specificity of your prompt. So, for example, you have the Bill 275. You asked what are the main arguments against it, but you could, for example, do what are the main arguments against this for an audience that are newbies, or I don't know how you would phrase that. How would you phrase that? Like people that have know nothing about it. What kind of prompt would you do to get information that's easily explainable to the general public?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do just out of habit is ask about the stakeholders who are involved. So I get a sense of, farmers and politicians and animal advocates and their organizations. And that gives me a sense of the landscape. And then I can look at all the arguments for and against. And then you could actually overlay those and you could say, what would be the most persuasive arguments for each of my stakeholder groups? And just playing around with it earlier today, I actually I had created a list of arguments, and then I said I wanted to write an opinion piece for a newspaper, and I thought that it would serve me to write a piece that was focused on the legal and policy community. And I asked, what are the arguments that we'd already discussed that are most compelling for this group? And then based on that information, an editorial for me, and it did that. And there are times where I have to go back and correct it and say, I think you left out something, or this doesn't make sense. Explain. It's amazing to me. It will admit its mistake and apologize and try to correct it, and that's part of the back and forth. So I know it looks like I came up with a perfect prompt. It gave me the answer that I wanted, but often there's a lot of back and forth to get to the prompt that gives you the output that you want. So the more you can be specific about what's the topic, the purpose, the style, the audience, all of those things are helpful in creating a piece such as this. This is a piece here. It was a blog post for animal justice in the tone of animal justice. And I could ask it to tone some things down if I wanted, or dial some things up, or add things. Another trick that I really like is asking it how well I did and where I can improve. It tells me what that is. I then say, apply that advice to the piece, rewrite it, and then ask it how well I did. And I was one of those kids that would probably do anything for the gold star in school. And so I keep going back and forth until I get my gold star from ChatGPT. But using it as a writing partner and an editor and a contributor, and not just as a shortcut, it really helps.
Yeah, so yeah, I think a lot of people view ChatGPT before they use it as just a glorified Google, but this is so very different. It is like this very personal assistant happening, but it's all about the prompts, right? It's all about what you put in. If you just put in what you would put into Google, you're probably not going to get what you're looking for. Am I right?
Right. So there is, if you use the subset that's really more Bing oriented, and actually if you go to Bing, it will actually look at a variety of sites that came up and then summarize those or use that content as a way of generating a reply. So you could look at the search results, or you could look at the sort of its summary or compilation to answer your question more directly, which is really powerful. But Google or traditional search engines are typically just saying, we think we found the right page for you, go here, and maybe they even highlight it, but there's no level of synthesis. It's not pulling things together, from different sources. So it's really taking things in a whole nother direction, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Tom, so we just covered, basically finding information, using it as an editor, putting in your own blog post and asking how can it be better. So let's move on. Are we ready to move on to images?
Sure.
Okay,
I'll jump around wherever you'd like.
let's do it.
So first of all, I will say I'm text-based, so I love words, and that's what I'm most familiar with. And I don't really necessarily, based on what I've read and know, DALL-E 3 probably isn't the best that's out there. A lot of people are migrating to Midjourney, and there's others. But I still wanted to show you what you could generate. And sometimes how difficult it is, particularly if you're not experienced. So I'm just navigating up here to the top, and I wanted to give this a chance to create a meme. That was one of the prompts that we were exploring for the webinar. So I said, create a meme showing a person handed a pair of blindfolds with a label Bill 275 on them, with the caption like, ready to see our farms, don your Bill C275 blindfolds. And that wasn't my prompt. Earlier, I said, hey, I want to create some memes. Give me some good ideas. This was one of the ideas. I plugged it in here, and now I'm seeing if it could, what it could generate for me. It still doesn't do a great job of text, so I often will leave the text off, and then you can add it in another program, whether it's Canva or Adobe Illustrator.
You mean
But
aesthetically, it doesn't do a great job of text. Yeah. Okay.
aesthetically it does. And sometimes it misspells and, it kind of like gets it close, but so you always have to be a little careful. And you can see even here, it cut it off. I thought, hey, why don't we do some type of a picture that was an inspiration, that was inspired from the, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, right? And I asked for a photorealistic image. You can ask for others. It could be a cartoon, a watercolor, in the style of a particular artist that you want. But one covering her eyes, one covering her ears, one covering her mouth, mimicking the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Well, it did a really good job with the see no evil, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but less so with the others. And so you basically can continue to refine it and ask additional questions. And so here it did a good job with, the pig and doing the shh sign. Later, I tried to do it basically with just cloth. And what was interesting is that there were some limitations of what I could ask it to do, because it would not allow me to create an image of an animal in distress.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I said make it the cloth a gag, it said nope, not going to do that. I even asked it to create an image of an intensive factory farm where the stalls, the gestation crates, would not allow a pig to turn around, and it actually refused to do that because I didn't know actually how to interpret it, but it said it could be a disturbing image for folks. And it did allow me to show an industrial setting, but it did have room for the, for the pigs to turn around. I'll just go down. I
Yeah,
think
so
there's one.
that's interesting, Tom, because
Yeah.
it's something we face in social media. We are trying to get more animal cruelty taken off of, say, YouTube and Facebook. But meanwhile, instead, they're shutting down our undercover investigation videos. So it's that double-edged sword, and those are some of the real problems we're going to face going forward, kind of thing. Like we can't get access to an image of a gestation crate, for example. So yeah, so keep going, Tom. Sorry.
No, I think that I really just wanted to give you a sample of what could be generated. These aren't necessarily the best images, but
yeah,
the
but
fact
the
that
thing is, you get it, and then you cultivate it, right?
exactly, and then some things are quite easy. Like PETA has some uh, different replacement phrases like feed two birds with one scone.
Yes, one
For
of my
example,
favorites.
if you put that in, I'm sure it'd be quite easily, generate an image for you of that fairly reliably. And then if you started to use this more often, you can go to another tool or have a vendor that's more experienced with, like Midjourney, for example. But for me, ChatGPT has really become a great thought partner. So even if I wasn't going to be producing the video or creating the image, I would use it as a way of exploring ideas. And then when I talk to the designer, I can say, hey, here are 4 ideas that I can show you visually what was in my head. It's close. Can you make this happen? And so there's always this opportunity that someone else could take it to the next level. But you've had a lot of back and forth with someone that's not costing you $50 or $100 or $150 an hour, for their time, and they get it and they appreciate it because they know exactly what you want. They don't have to do a lot of there's not a lot of back and forth.
Okay, so Tom, there's some questions that have come up around this,
Yeah.
and just in copyright in particular. So someone was asking, if you create this image, does any image that you create become your copyrighted piece? Who does this belong to? Who does this generated material belong to?
Yeah. So my understanding is it does not belong to OpenAI or whoever generated the image. And although things are probably going to have to work out in the court system as well. Those things that are produced are likely not going to be able to be copyrighted, at least not in the near term. I'm not a lawyer. This isn't my area of expertise. And depending on which week it is, you feel like it might be leaning one way or the other, because some of the products that come out of this really require a lot of information and data and input. There was an example of someone who won an art contest. The prize was only $300, but it was generated with AI, and so he was disqualified. And it was a little bit of a scandal as well, I think. But you know, in his defense, it wasn't like he sat down and wrote one prompt and got the picture. There was a lot of back and forth and changes and modifications, and so it's hard to know where, you know, the help that you're getting from a tool is insufficient to keep you from saying I did it, and when it's helping so much that you really could say this is my artwork, this is a reflection of me. But you know, for the moment, you should feel free to use whatever images you create in any way that you want. But you're probably not going to be able to copyright them and say no one else can use this image of a monkey covering the eyes of a sheep.
Mm. And also, let's just take this opportunity to talk about a blog. Say a blog was written with the help I wrote a blog with the help of ChatGPT. Now, is there a possibility of plagiarism there? Like, is that considered plagiarism, or is that considered my own content that I've created?
Well, it's not considered plagiarism in that you are copying someone else, because in general, for most longer form text, the answer is not going to be the same. Like if you ask for a vegan recipe for an apple pie, you might get the same one. But if you're asking for a blog post, it's very unlikely to be like someone else's blog. In fact, if you go back on another day and ask it to generate a blog post with the same prompt, it will often give you something something different.
Okay, so basically, it's not so from what I understand, ChatGPT is being trained not to take big vast amounts of stuff from like somebody else's article or blog. It's not just giving you verbatim somebody else's work. It's taking nuggets, tiny little nuggets, and putting it together. Is that right, Tom?
That's correct, and putting it together in the style that you specify. It will vary based on the prompt. So there's very little likelihood it could happen. So it has, whether it happened because there was a snippet that got cut and paste, that's not literally how it would work, but if that was kind of what was happening, or if it just happened to generate something that was, already out there. Because two authors can both write the same sentence. It just doesn't necessarily mean that it was plagiarism. Some people will take the content and put it through a plagiarism checker just to make sure. So if that makes you feel comfortable, doing that. I think one of the questions that people often ask is, what's the level of attribution that I have to give? OpenAI does not require any attribution, so it's really about you. If I get a little help, I'm not going to mention it at all. I don't mention that I use Grammarly. I don't mention that I use a spell checker or a service to help me, manage the bibliography. They're just tools. I'm just relying on my gut at this level. At some point, you want to be able to say, hey, this was written, with the support of, ChatGPT or AI. And you can even ask ChatGPT, what attribution what are the possible ways that I could attribute your involvement? And it will give you some recommendations. And then you can say, oh, I like this one, developed, with the involvement of ChatGPT might be an example.
But yes, but you aren't required to do that by
Correct.
at this
Yeah.
point. At this point, it's not a requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tom, we don't have tons of time left. Of course, I don't mind if you have a few more minutes to spend with us to go a little bit over if folks want to hear more. But again, everybody is welcome to leave when you need to. But Tom, I really want to go on to this role playing thing because I think this is for a lot of our grassroots advocates here. This could be huge that are doing street activism and are doing interviews, or anybody that has to dialogue with opponents, kind of thing. So give us a little rundown of that, Tom.
So I started a conversation and I provided ChatGPT with a description of Bill C-275. And I did this because I was, it didn't have access in this particular one to the internet. So it wouldn't have the most recent information that was available. So I pasted a description in here so I could use that as the starting point for the role play. And it said, basically, thank you for that. It's a great summary. And then I said, I would like to role play a scenario where I'm a Canadian citizen concerned about animal welfare, and you're my MP. And the scenario is we're meeting in person during your office hours to discuss the bill. I described the role both for me as a Canadian citizen and the role that I wanted ChatGPT to play, that it was a political representative. And I said, please start the conversation. And so the MP starts the conversation, and then I'm able to respond to that. Then I'll scroll down and the MP says, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to express your concerns so thoughtfully. It's clear. And then it goes down the list.
Okay,
And
so
then
what's happening here is you're putting in something, then they're responding, then you're putting in something, and so in real time you're having to sort of think on your feet like you would in the office.
exactly. And when I'm on my phone, I can do it voice to voice. So saying I'm saying my response, and it's responding to me in its voice, and it sounds very much like a very polite, perhaps a little overly structured conversation, but it's really great. It's really great practice.
So, and what about with like people that are, like I said, doing street activism, a cube of truth, or something like that? They could do on their phone sort of a real time, like a conversation with an agitated member of the public, kind of thing, just to practice their way of bringing somebody around.
Yeah, and as a training tool, it's absolutely wonderful because it builds your confidence that you're going to be able to perform well in a situation where you're not as comfortable. So, I've walked the halls before in the U.S., and it could be really intimidating if you've never gone before. You don't know what questions they're going to ask. You don't know if you're prepared or smart enough or an expert enough to do it. But once you've done some back and forth, and then as you can see on my screen now, it actually evaluated how well I did. What were the strengths of my responses, and what were the areas of improvement, which is actually absolutely wonderful. And then you can say, let's try this again, and you can start the conversation over and see how you improve.
I love it. Okay, let's keep moving. What's
Okay.
another way to use this magical tool?
Why don't we look at a protest?
Mhm.
And I set it up again with some foundational information about the bill that was produced in another conversation because I wanted to have that. And then I said, if Bill C-275 passes, I'd like to lead protests in Canada. Please suggest ideas. I could have been a lot more specific, but I often kind of like to keep it open initially, and then I can always refine my prompt if I have to. So it gave me some great advice. Clarifying the objectives, gathering support, plan the protest, engage the media, maintain peace and order, follow up, evaluate and reflect. And I don't know. I haven't been involved with a lot of protest, but my gut feel says uh, this is probably a pretty good list, and there's some things here that I didn't necessarily think that I would have gone and done it without these, like assigning a marshal or um, uh, preparing a press release, to get the most, out of the opportunity. So then I said, please create a detailed plan that I can modify as appropriate. So it then took that outline and then began to actually say what I could do. It was almost like it gave me a template and then it started to fill in that template based on what it thought. And I can go back and change anything, but it identified, for example, the key messages that I thought. It talked to me about the core team and that I needed a core team of 5 to 10. It talked to me about a date and time, where it could attract the most participants and media attention. Uh, it talked to me about maintaining peace and order and what that looked like. So anyway, it really, really helps you out. And then
Mhm.
as you add detail, you can say, what do you think? What am I missing? What can I make it better? What can I do to make it better? So again, if you don't get the answer that you want initially, keep changing the prompts or providing feedback. Hey, I really liked what you did, GPT, but I really needed more detail. Or you're using language I don't understand, or whatever guidance that you want. It learns from that feedback and responds quite well.
And the same thing goes for campaigns and developing impactful messages, because again we can give really specific things around that. We can so yeah, let's talk about campaigns, Tom.
Yeah, if you don't, yeah. Again, gave it some background that I thought it would need. And then I would say, I'd like to create a public campaign to encourage citizens to oppose ag-gag legislation. What factors should I consider? So it gave me the list of the things I should consider, like understanding the legislation, knowing the target audience, crafting a clear message, leveraging the media and digital platforms, building a coalition. So again, just all the main ingredients of what a campaign looks like. And if you had never done campaign work, I really think that this would be a great jumpstart and how to get going,
Mhm.
to get moving on something. And then you can dive down into specific areas. So number 3 was crafting a clear message. And I said, let's work together on number 3. And it said, absolutely, let's get to work. And so it, began to say, how to define your core message, address misconceptions like ag-gag laws are often framed as necessary for biosecurity, counteract this narrative by explaining how transparency and ethical oversight can coexist with biosecurity measures. So it's actually providing you with, a rebuttal, to get ahead of some of the arguments. Great advice about humanizing, the issue, about sharing real stories, highlight public health concerns, offer constructive alternatives, keep it simple. So again, it gives you all of that advice. And then I said, well, keeping that all in mind, and I guess this is an aspect that I may not have made clear, but it remembers everything within the conversation. So it knows what advice it gave me. It knows what my objective is. It knows the background. And so when I say, what are 10 messages I should consider, it's giving me messages based on the conversation, based on the topic and the parameters.
Amazing.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I look at this and I think, that is absolutely amazing. I love it. I'm going to go with it. Sometimes it's close, but I can build on it and dive deeper into something. So this is just an example of how, if you're going to start a campaign and you want to jumpstart that process, go to ChatGPT, lay it out, fill it, start filling in the blanks. You can even ask it to create a table, where you have, the main things that you need to describe on the left column, and then start to fill it in, with the campaign details in the right column. So even a table format is an option that's available to you.
Amazing. Yeah. And like this is sort of working on campaigns on a bigger level, but you could also, use it to come up with a campaign slogan, for example, right? If your audience was kids that were, yeah, kids that grew up in the 80s, you could say, slogan that uses some sort of 80s pop culture thing. Like the possibilities are endless for being able to either on a huge wide lens level, and then to get down into this really micro level as well.
Yeah, I agree completely. Is there anything else that you'd like me to show, or should I come off of screen
Come
share?
off
Or
of screen because we have a bunch of questions for you. You may have to jump
okay,
on again, but I do want to throw some more questions.
glad to answer
um
them.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we talked about the specificity in the prompts being key. We talked about that Chat GPT is not always accurate, and I think a lot of people are really getting a little bit panicky about that, Tom. So, do you have any sense, like, is it always wrong? Is it 50% wrong? Is it 2% wrong? Like, give us a little bit of a sense of how vigilant we need to be around this.
Well, I think you have to be vigilant whether you're 5% wrong or 50% wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but having said that, I think that it's wrong less than 5% of the time. Um, my advice in getting started and trying to figure out how concerned you should be is pick a topic that you're familiar with and generate content on that topic so that you're in the know. So for example, we were wondering if we were going to use ChatGPT to write a blog post. And we started with a topic that we didn't know anything about, and we thought this would be a great way to save time, right? Because we won't have to get up to speed. We'll just have chat. We produced it, and then we realized I have no idea if this is good or not, or right or not. So we ended up writing something on political ecology. I have two super smart colleagues that know all about political ecology and how it relates to the animal welfare movement. And so they were able to look at the work product and say, wow, that was good. That was really impressive. And, there was a few errors in the citations, but generally it was great. So as a way of building up confidence, start with something where you're an expert and then evaluate how well it's performing. That's what we did.
Great idea, Tom. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, people are asking about the bias. I think this is a really important piece to talk about in terms of what we do and what we're going to be doing on ChatGPT. So Karen asks, for example, can someone corrupt ChatGPT by feeding in false information in huge amounts, i.e. if the dairy industry starts flooding the internet with false info through bots and skew the results of a search for conditions for cows on dairy farms?
Um, that is a really important question, and what a lot of folks in the industry are worried about, where AI begins to create so much content and then AI starts to eat that content back. Um, and there's not an answer for that. Is it a concern? It's definitely a concern. Um, there's always this race between, you know, generating undetectable content or content that you can't detect that it was written by AI, and then the detectors, which are supposed to detect whether something was written by AI. And there's this race, and I don't think we'll ever be able to say with confidence that text was generated by AI, which means uh, we're going to be susceptible to those kinds of biases, continuing. Um, Industry, I think, is going to have to do something about that. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how that problem is going to be solved, but it is something to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were going to speculate, I think what we'll end up having, in the same way that we have news services where we get our news that tend to reinforce our own viewpoints, I think we're going to have bots that do the same thing. That we're going to go ask questions and ask advice of a bot that is designed to be skewed left or right or liberal or conservative. and you want your children to use I'm just making this up as an example, you want your children to use a bot that's going to give answers that reinforce the parental views. Um, so yeah, kind of scary and lots of unknowns.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the biases go, you know, is speciesism pretty prevalent in Chat GPT? Yeah. And how do we
Definitely.
circumvent that if we're looking to do work?
Well, I think part of it is changing the content that we're producing so that those changes get picked up as being a societal change. So using gender pronouns to talk about animals when we know the gender of the animal, for example. Not saying that's good or bad, but if we did, that might change pronoun usage. We'll stop saying it and say she or he
Or
again
they?
when or
Yeah.
they
Hmm.
when the gender is known. There's really some weird things right now. So depending on this situation, it might say, "Here's a recipe for cooking a dog," or "Sorry, we're not going to give you a recipe for cooking a dog. We don't eat dogs." And so you're seeing ChatGPT going through these, you know, iterations where it's trying to decide what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Um, and one thing that's encouraging to me is ChatGPT. I can't speak for the other, you know, uh, AIs, but it seems to have an awareness that animal welfare matters to a lot of folks, and that there are some sensitivities around that, and that they better be careful about that. So, um, showing an animal that's being hurt, for example, isn't generally isn't allowed. I think I saw in the chat that maybe someone else was able to work around that. It is rather inconsistent, um, but in the end, I think that ChatGPT will be great for animals because we'll be able to generate more images that elicit empathy, that show the depth of their thinking and their emotions. I think that we'll be able to change the language. I think we'll be able to have more campaigns. So again, these are just ideas that come to mind, but just as an example, uh, it would be possible to have ChatGPT to monitor, the top 1,000 journalists in the world and what their work products are, catch those things that aren't representing animals in the right way, and draft an email and say, "Hey, I'm an AI. I'm not a real person, but I've read your articles, and I have to tell you, you keep referring to animals where you know the gender as it, and that's a problem, and this is why." So again, I think that these tools are going to raise more awareness and challenge dominant narratives rather than to reinforce dominant narratives, because we're going to move beyond that base of information that was used to create the AI.
Amazing. Tom, can I ask you just one more question? Do you
Sure.
have time? Okay.
I have plenty of
Um,
time.
Okay, great. A few people have been asking and worrying about the security of information entered on ChatGPT, just different security aspects. I guess it's safe to say you shouldn't be putting in anything very personal into ChatGPT. Is that right?
Anything personal or proprietary, if you're talking about your organization's information, because there's always um, the chance, the likelihood that that content and those interactions are going to somehow find their way into other responses, because AI is always learning. And one of the things that companies are doing is they're saying, if you don't want us to use our data, we can make that possible, but it'll cost you. And so uh, when you access ChatGPT or GPT-4 through Microsoft's offerings that are paid, they make sure that your information is just your information. It doesn't enter into to the AI model. But even then, I'd be a little, a little hesitant.
Since you said you're okay to stay a couple of extra minutes, I'm just going
Yeah,
to throw a couple more in here.
yeah.
Eleanor says, I have a paid subscription to ChatGPT, whereas the data used to go up to September 2021. I read that now for paid subscriptions, it's real time, yet I do not get real time data. On my iPhone, it goes to January 2022, but on my Mac, it still goes to September 2021. I lodged a trouble ticket, but did not get a useful response. Any tips on this timeliness issue?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it looks like on the phone. It's probably the same, but when on the I think it's on the phone and on the desktop, you have a choice between choosing 3.5 or 4.0. Some people like to use 3.5 because it's faster. So for some things, but once you select 4.0, it pops up with options that are available. I showed them to you at the beginning, like you can use, uh, with Bing, which gives you access to more recent information. So uh, choose the option for ChatGPT 4 with Bing, and then you'll get up-to-date information. Like I knew exactly what, C275 was, that had made it through its third reading.
Yes, right. And so that's a big difference also with 3.5 is their training only goes to September 2021. Is that right, Tom?
Um,
Or no?
so, well, I think the way I would describe it, the most of the training might, again, I'm a lay person, I'm just an enthusiastic user, but my impression is that most of the training, kind of what it's been taught to think, if you will, is still may have a cutoff at that date. But as it's making decisions and providing information, it can go out and get new information in the same way as if you had given it a document.
Got it. Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Gwendolyn, I don't know if you know much about the news blocks that are happening here on social media, Tom, for Canada. But basically, because of new legislation, Facebook and Instagram are not allowing any news to be posted through their platforms, no, news in general. So does that, Gwendolyn's just asking whether that affects the results that we're getting in ChatGPT.
Um, ChatGPT, when it's accessing the internet, is going to find articles that it thinks is meaningful to answer your question or to really to respond to you. So I believe that it will find that information elsewhere and incorporate it into the answers that it gives. Now, if that content was only available on Facebook, and I don't know if that's a scenario that
No, it'd
you're
be pulling it from the news sources itself, right? Yeah. Yeah.
correct. So
Amazing.
you probably would probably not be impacted in that way at all.
Excellent. And we're gonna a last question. It's a little bit more esoteric. Jenny's asking, is it possible it's dumbing us down a little, perhaps stifling our own creativity, or is it bolstering us?
Definitely bolstering. I can say that without hesitation. I know there's this tendency to think of it as a shortcut. How can I write without having to spend, the effort? And while it can be used that way, I think what it's going to end up doing is raising the quality of our work and the expectation of our work, and allow us to engage in material and content in a more creative way, in a more thoughtful way, in a more intellectual way. I don't have to spend 5 hours getting that first draft done, and then start to think really deeply about the topic. Um, it it can produce a draft for me, and in 20 minutes, I'm where I was after 5 hours. Now I can ask detailed questions about, is the thesis right? Do I have the right data points? Am I using the right words to describe this? Could it be framed in a different way? And so to me, that's really high quality work. And I think that's what the expectation is going to be, that stuff that's generated just by GPT without a lot of that back and forth, it's not going to be meaningful. It's not going to add value. So, and then just a side note, I know we're coming to the end, but One of the things that I love about this is I am not talented enough to write a song, but boy, I have a few lyrics in mind that I think would make a great song. You can go to a site and compose a song, and it'll come out pretty good. Um, I don't speak a second language, uh, but I can go to a site now. I can talk in English, and then I can have that translated, and it makes it look like my mouth is moving and I'm speaking French or Chinese. And it's only going to get more, more convincing. Everyone wants to write a children's book. Parents now are going to ChatGPT and saying, "I want to write a book about this topic, animal origami," um, and it'll create a book. And some people are saying, we also want to introduce these, uh, vowels or these sounds or these words or build this vocabulary. And so there's just, it's allowing people with average talent or less than average talent to be able to create works of art and poetry and music in a way that they couldn't before. And so I just think that's magical and it just excites me.
Yeah, like some of us have great, brilliant ideas, but maybe not the technical skill to execute it. And so this gives people a window, gives them an avenue to be able to do this. So amazing. So Tom, is there anything right now that you're working on that AJers can support you in? Maybe just to take a look at what Stray Dog Institute does, or is there anything else we as a team love to assist?
I think it's one of a mindset, but we're really trying to find wherever we can allies in other social movements, and not in a way that just convinces them to join us in our fight for animals, which we think is really important, but to meaningfully engage with them. And so, uh, for example, some of our philanthropy, we have a bucket just for racial justice in the food system. And some of those grants don't affect animals directly, but if we're saying these other things are important to us, we need to, walk the talk. And that's one way that we walk the talk. We write about blog posts around issues that may not center animals, but they still talk about the food system. We need to be concerned about workers. We make a lot of investments on the Stray Dog Capital side of Stray Dog, the venture capital side. And but I can also tell you that collectively we're concerned for the impact that it would have on farmers in rural communities. And so we've made investments of time and money and a just transition for farmers, and we're concerned about rural economy. So it's not a specific ask about going out and doing something, but it's about trying to see our social movement as part of a larger social movement for animal rights, for food system transformation, for workers, and trying to make those connections and being authentic about it, and being knowledgeable about it. And I think in the end it will surface quite well. And then as you're thinking about campaigns and interventions, one thing that really helps is to say, if I move forward in this campaign or this protest, who else is affected by the outcome? And what can I do to minimize the negative impacts on them? Uh, so, whether that's job displacement or local producers or whatever it might be. So just thinking about who else that's out there and how they're affected. And I think that would mean a lot to us because that's a viewpoint that we're trying to promote quite actively. Thank you
Absolutely,
for
Tom.
asking.
Yes, no, we're in the Animal Justice Academy community. Intersectionality is huge for us. We're always trying to lead with compassion. So we love that that's, a main pillar for you at Stray Dog Institute. I just a couple of notes before we give Tom our big thank you. If you're not part of the Animal Justice Academy community, it's free, animaljusticeacademy.com. And And speaking of free, I always forget this. So AJA is completely free, the course, the events, the resources. But if you'd like to help keep this initiative going, please consider giving a donation. Kirsten has put that in the chat. And the other thing I want to note is that in 2 weeks, our next Animal Justice Academy lunchtime hour will be a coaching hour for animal advocates. We haven't done one of those for a long time. My bread and vegan butter is as a coach for change makers. And so this is your opportunity to be able to bring any struggles that you're having, challenges as an animal advocate in any arena, whether that is personally, campaign-wise, and we always have a really beautiful time at this coaching hour. And then on November 30th, we're going to be talking about effective narrative. There's been a huge study done, folks, that is really giving us answers as to what the narrative, the messaging is that we need to put out there for farmed animals. We're going to dissect that with our special guest on November 30th. You'll have more, see more about that. All right. So Tom, can you see the whole gallery right now?
I
Okay.
can,
Yeah.
yes.
So Destiny says it so well. Tom, this was so helpful. I thought I knew what I was doing with ChatGPT, but it turns out there's so much more. You unlocked a whole new world for me. Ha ha ha. Appreciate you always. Animal Justice Academy. Can we give Tom a big Animal Justice Academy? Thank you. Amazing, Tom. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for showing up and being so studious here. It's been wonderful. I've seen people taking notes. Tom, thank you for your valuable time and for your generous spirit in this movement.
Thank you for having me and for the warmth of this community. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a great one. Take care. Bye-bye.